This will be the true story of how a president wanted to win an election he lost, and so he tried to steal it through a scheme.
States want to revote. The states got defrauded. They were given false information. They voted on it. Now they want to recertify. They want it back. All Vice President Pence has to do is send it back to the states to recertify. And we become president, and you are the happiest people.
At the time, nobody understood what Trump actually meant when he uttered these words, because unbeknownst to the American public, behind closed doors, a plot was developed to keep him in power. In the months following the results of the 2020 election, Donald Trump was repeatedly informed by his closest aides that he had lost at the polls.
And the president said something to the effect of, "I don't want people to know we lost, Mark. This is embarrassing. Figure it out. We need to figure it out. I don't want people to know that we lost."
And that although they had investigated the integrity of the election, there was no evidence of voter fraud.
I had 3 discussions with the president that I can recall. One was on November 23rd, one was on December 1st, and one was on December 14th. And I've been through sort of the give and take of those discussions. And in that context, I made it clear I did not agree with the idea of saying the election was stolen and putting out this stuff, which I told the president was bullshit. And, I didn't want to be a part of it.
But Trump would not give up that easily. So he instructed his lawyers to seek a way to keep him in power. Many told him it was immoral and illegal.
I just remember I either replied or called somebody saying, unless we have litigation pending that's like in these states, like I don't think this is appropriate. Or, this isn't the right thing to do.
But others were less concerned with the illegality of their actions, and they developed a scheme that involved creating fraudulent slates of electors, falsely claiming that some states that had voted for Biden had actually voted for Trump instead.
To be clear, did you hear the White House counsel's office say that this plan to have alternate electors meet and cast votes for Donald Trump in states that he had lost was not legally sound?
Yes, sir.
And who was present for that meeting that you remember?
It was in our office. It was Mr. Meadows, Mr. Giuliani, and a few of Mr. Giuliani's associates.
These fake elector slates are what Trump references in his speech and on Twitter.
We have come to demand that Congress do the right thing and only count the electors who have been lawfully slated.
They refer to a group of individuals chosen by a state to cast the state's votes for president, as decided by the citizens. Something that is usually a formality in the political process. The idea was to mimic this procedure in key American states so that Congress would receive fake documents that would flip the voting, making Trump the winner of the election. Some people were even tricked into signing the fake documents.
If I knew what I knew now, I wouldn't have done it. It was kept from us that there was this alternate scheme. Alternate motive.
The scheme, hurriedly put together, ran into an initial difficulty. None of the states were willing to recognize the imposters, and in some cases directly blocked access to the state capitals. Like in the case of Michigan State, where state officials blocked a group of fake electors from entering the premises.
What did he say? He said we can't enter.
The electors are already here. They've been checked in.
Captain Green, is it Captain?
First Lieutenant Green.
First Lieutenant, can you deliver this?
I cannot.
Okay. Is there anyone here that's willing to allow us, I've got elected officials and electors, to deliver this to the Senate today at 2 p.m.
I'm telling you that they're not going to be allowed to enter the Capitol, sir.
All right, thank you, Lieutenant.
You're welcome. Thank you.
In the meanwhile, Trump tried to strong-arm state officials into recounting votes or committing illegal actions.
So, look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes it's more illegal for you than it is for them, because you know what they did and you're not reporting it. That's a criminal offense, and you can't let that happen. That's a big risk to you and to Riot, your lawyers. That's a big risk. So what are we going to do here, folks? I only need 11,000 votes, fellas. I need 11,000 votes. Give me a break.
It is often proud Republicans that reject his delirious demands.
And then boom, president comes on. He said, well, unfortunately, we've got a lot of fraud all across the country. And Rudy says, well, we've heard that there's an arcane law in Arizona that the legislature has the authority that if the legislature feels that there's doubt in the election, that they can set aside the Biden electors and send the Trump electors to Washington. I said, wait a minute. I've never heard of that before. That's a new one on me.
So is it clear in your mind that President Trump basically wanted you to overturn the result in Arizona?
Of course he did. I mean, he wanted me to send him in.
A proud conservative Republican with a deep Christian faith, Rusty Bowers knew he had only one option.
And I said, Mr. President, I campaigned for you, I walked for you, and I voted for you. But I will do nothing illegal for you. I will do nothing illegal for you.
Enraged by these complications, Trump pressured the Justice Department to falsely announce it had found election fraud. But his own appointed Attorney General, a lifelong Republican, told him his claims were bullshit, and he resigned.
I made the statement that to date we have not seen fraud on a scale that could have affected a different outcome in the election. And the president was as mad as I've ever seen him, and he was trying to control himself. And the president said, well, this is killing me. You didn't have to say this. You must have said this because you hate Trump. You hate Trump. And I told him that the stuff that his people were shoveling out to the public was bullshit. I mean, that the claims of fraud were bullshit.
So, after the resignation of the head of the DOJ, Trump appointed another lifelong Republican as head, and again asked him to lie to the American public by saying that they had found election fraud.
You also noted that Mr. Rosen said to Mr. Trump, quote, DOJ can't and won't snap its fingers and change the outcome of the election. How did the president respond to that, sir?
He responded very quickly and said, essentially, that's not what I'm asking you to do. What I'm just asking you to do is just say it was corrupt and leave the rest to me and the Republican congressman.
So let's now put up the notes where you quote the president. As you're speaking to that, he said, the president said, just say the election was corrupt and leave the rest to me and the Republican congressman. So, Mr. Donahue, that's a direct quote from President Trump, correct?
That's an exact quote from the president, yes.
The next note shows that even that the president kept pressing. Even though he had been told that there was no evidence of fraud, the president keeps saying that the department was, quote, obligated to tell people that this was an illegal, corrupt election.
That's also an exact quote from the president, yes.
But again, Trump was refused. At this point, Trump considered firing his brand new Attorney General to replace him with a severely underqualified environmental lawyer who had promised him that he would finally declare there had been election fraud. In response, the entire Justice Department threatened to resign, effectively blocking Trump from pursuing this course of action.
Did you eventually tell the president that mass resignations would occur if he installed Mr. Clark and what the consequences would be?
Yes, so this was in line with the president saying, what do I have to lose? Along those lines, he said, so suppose I do this. So suppose I replace him, Jeff Rosen, with him, Jeff Clark. What would you do? And I said, Mr. President, I would resign immediately. I'm not working 1 minute for this guy, who I had just declared was completely incompetent. And so the president immediately turned to Mr. Engel, and he said, Steve, you wouldn't resign, would you? And he said, absolutely I would, Mr. President. You leave me no choice. And then I said, and we're not the only ones. No one cares if we resign. If Steve and I go, that's fine. It doesn't matter, but I'm telling you what's going to happen. You're going to lose your entire department leadership. Every single AAG will walk out on you. Your entire department leadership will walk out within hours. When the president turned to me and said, Steve, you wouldn't leave, would you? I said, Mr. President, I've been with you through 4 attorneys general, including 2 acting attorney general, but I couldn't be part of this. And then the other thing that I said was that, look, all anyone is going to sort of think about when they see this, no one is going to read this letter. All anyone is going to think is that you went through 2 attorneys general in 2 weeks until you found the environmental guy to sign this thing. And so the story is not going to be that the Department of Justice has found massive corruption that would have changed the results of the election. It's going to be the disaster of Jeff Clark. And I think at that point, Pat Cipollone said, yeah, this is a murder-suicide pact, this letter.
But again, Trump refused to give up because of these setbacks and persisted in his pursuit of power. It didn't matter if the Department of Justice was not willing to falsely declare they had found election fraud. There was still a path to victory. If he could get the fake certifications into Congress, claiming that key states had voted for him, creating confusion and disruption in the days before the election was certified, then Trump believed that the vice president had the power to unilaterally accept the certifications he preferred. He just had to choose the fraudulent ones, and the election would be won. So, without the approval of the states, the falsified elector documents were sent to the US Senate and the National Archives by Trump's co-conspirators. The pieces were put in motion, and on January 6, the day of the certification of the vote, everything was supposed to fall in place. There was only one small problem. The Vice President of the United States of America wasn't having it. Leading up to January 6, Trump fiercely pressured Pence. During a phone call on the first day of the new year, he berated him, at one point bluntly declaring, "You're too honest, Mike." A sentence quite revealing of Trump's feelings towards the legitimacy of his own actions. On January the 5th, Trump tweeted out, "States want to correct their votes, which they now know were based on irregularities and fraud, plus corrupt process never received legislative approval. All Mike Pence has to do is send them back to the states, and we win! Do it, Mike. This is a time for extreme courage." A deranged tweet that reeked of desperation. On the day of the certification of the vote, a senator's chief of staff tried to pass a list of fraudulent electors to Pence, minutes before the vice president was to certify the election.
We got handed an envelope that was supposed to go to the vice president. I didn't know. So we called out the vice president. He didn't want it. We didn't deliver it.
It was in these moments that Trump tried his last card to remain in power and sent his supporters to protest the certification. This is when all hell broke loose. Shots were fired, and one of Trump's supporters was hit in the left shoulder, passing away shortly after. Alas, this did not halt the crowd's advance. After repeated attempts to stop the riots from breaking into Congress, the Capitol Police was eventually overwhelmed by the number of protesters, and in some cases allowed them to enter cleared areas to de-escalate a situation that could rapidly become even more tragic. In the meanwhile, Trump made calls to Republican lawmakers, urging them to continue objecting to the certification of the vote. And while the riots were ongoing, he tweeted, "Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done." Just moments prior, Secret Service agents had tried to get Pence to flee the building. But Pence had refused evacuation, and for the full duration of the riots, remained in the Capitol complex, because he didn't want to give the impression he was abandoning his post. Not exactly the actions of a coward. From the start of the riots, it took more than 3 hours for Trump to to tweet to his supporters to go home. But in the end, Mike Pence successfully defended the Constitution.
I want the American people to know that I had no right to overturn the election. And then on that day, President Trump asked me to put him over the Constitution. But I chose the Constitution, and I always will.
The plot to overturn the election failed, leaving America battered but unbroken.
But this election is now over. Congress has certified the results. I don't want to say the election's over. I just want to say Congress has certified the results without saying the election's over, okay?
But Congress is certified. Now Congress is
Yeah,
certified.
right.
Now Congress
I didn't say over, so let me see. Go to the paragraph before.
In those challenging days, Pence was only but one of the many lifelong Republicans who sacrificed their jobs and careers to safeguard democracy. In 2024, Trump runs for president again, a role recently granted juridical immunity for official acts by the Supreme Court. Moreover, his vice presidential pick claims he would have done what Mike Pence lacked the audacity to do.
So would you have certified the election results had you been vice president?
If I had been vice president, I would have told the states like Pennsylvania, Georgia, and so many others that we needed to have multiple slates of electors, and I think the U.S. Congress should have fought over it from there. That is the legitimate way to deal with an election that a lot of folks, including me, think had a lot of problems in 2020. I think that's what we should have done.
With increased powers, a more loyal vice president, and stronger support in Congress, Trump would find it much easier to exploit fraudulent means to subvert the government of the United States. In November 2024, voters will have the final opportunity to hold Trump to account and determine the value of their democracy.